The government cracking down on Islamic extremists, dangerous revolutionaries in their midst? No, just ordinary Australians complaining, demonstrating peacefully against the lockdowns, beaten by police. There's a lot of footage like this from Australia, and in a moment we'll show you more. But something that's not immediately obvious from the American vantage is that this isn't all of Australia. The whole country is not locked down. In Australia, most of the lockdowns are in the eastern part of the country. That's where the capital of the country is. That's where the federal government has the most control. The western part, the less populated part of Australia, meanwhile, which is home to most of the country's natural resources, isn't locked down at all. 50,000 fans just crowded inside a stadium for a rugby match in Perth, the capital of Western Australia. No one was beaten with nightsticks or hosed by the police. The rugby match was not a super spreader event. Western Australia has had virtually no cases of COVID. How does that happen? How does Western Australia not lock down but remain virtually COVID-free? Simple, by controlling its border. Western Australia did not let thousands of people stream in from anywhere they wanted to in the world. They're not Texas. They didn't care about protecting their borders. They weren't worried about being called racist. It seems common sense, and it worked. And here's the revealing thing. In Australia, the federal government is angry that Western Australia has closed its borders. They want that part of the country to open those borders. Really? Why would that be? Well, according to ABC News, Australia's government is, quote, arguing that Western Australia's internal border restrictions are a drag on the national economy, end quote. Well, that's kind of interesting, because the problem with Australia's economy right now does not come from Western Australia closing its borders. It comes from the lockdowns. Those are the biggest drag on the national economy ever conceived in Australia. So are those police SWAT teams beating people for going outside. COVID mandates are a far greater threat to Australia's economy and its social fabric than COVID itself. Here's the health minister of Queensland in Eastern Australia explaining that outdoor mask mandates are absolutely necessary because of 2 new COVID cases. That's 2, not 200,000 or 2,000, but 2. Watch.
What these 2 new cases mean is that we will be extending immediately the directive in relation to mask wearing to the Gold Coast.
Okay, so we want to pause for a minute to give you a sense of the scope of the pandemic in Australia. To date, COVID has caused 1,300, quote, recorded deaths in the entire country. Australia has 25 million people. Now, that 1,300 figure includes people who, quote, died with probable COVID. What does that mean? We have no idea. No one's ever defined it. In Alberta, Canada, and this might tell you something, the health minister just announced that anyone who stays home from any illness will be counted by the Canadian government as a COVID patient. Then she pretended she didn't say that because it's obviously insane, but it's on video so we know that she did. In Australia, the government has adopted a similar standard. Anyone who leaves home apparently is also being counted as a COVID patient. Here's a man in Melbourne this Sunday who made the mistake of walking a block from his house.
He lives a block away.
Yeah, but he has
so what do you mean?
He has no reason to be here. He doesn't have a valid reason to be out today. He wasn't wearing a face mask.
Hold on, he has a face mask in his pocket. He was just smoking a cigarette. He just came to get lunch with me.
And the reason I didn't have a mask on because I was having a cigarette. I've got 2 masks in my pocket. Like, what else do you want me to do?
Here's the interesting thing. Apart from that's obvious authoritarianism, it's terrifying that could happen in a civilized English-speaking country, in Australia, of all places. But you'll notice the police never ask the man if he's been vaccinated. You'd think that'd be the first question you'd ask, because vaccination works, doesn't it? That's why it's mandatory, right? That's an important point because publicly Australia's leaders are still pretending that vaccination status matters. In New South Wales, again in Eastern Australia, one official promised that the unvaccinated will be allowed to retain their freedom.
The message to the unvaccinated is that you will not achieve any further freedom unless you get vaccinated. And a further and final message to regional New South Wales. There will be individuals in regional New South Wales who choose not to be vaccinated who will lose their freedoms on the 11th of October.
No more freedom if you don't get the vax. But they will arrest you for being outside smoking a cigarette a block from your home without a mask and not even ask you whether you've been vaccinated. So if vaccination status is that important as a health matter, wouldn't that be the first question you ask? But they didn't even bother. Meanwhile, in the same Australian state, New South Wales, officials are telling people that whether they are vaccinated or not, they're not allowed to go to church.
In the name of Jesus, lockdowns are over in the cities of New South Wales.
It's unclear what passage this pastor is preaching from, but it's not the public health order. His church, the Christ Embassy in Blacktown, is in lockdown. Hard lockdown. There was no QR code on the door, costing the organisation $5,000. Each of the 30 adult worshippers fined $1,000.
Whether it's a soccer match, whether it's a church service, it doesn't matter. You cannot gather as they did at Blacktown.
Oh, so you have to get vaccinated to have any of your freedoms, but even if you are vaccinated, you're not allowed to go to church. So what is the point of vaccination? Why did the federal government in Australia lock everybody down if there's no actual way to stop the lockdowns? And more to the point, why do they want open borders in Western Australia if closing the borders actually has kept the population safe? Well, they want open borders there for the same reason they want it here. In New South Wales, one official, the state's health officer, explained it out loud. Watch.
We will be looking at what contact tracing looks like in the New World Order. Yes, it will be pubs and clubs and other things if we have a positive case there.
The New World Order! She said it out loud. This is a really interesting story, what's happening in Australia and what it means for the rest of the Anglosphere, very much including us. And maybe that's why, globally, most media organizations have refused to cover it.
The family of the world's top tennis champ Novak Djokovic claims he is being treated like a prisoner over his vaccination status. The sports star finding himself holed up in an immigration detention hotel in Australia after being told he does not qualify for a medical exemption to play in the Australian Open. Djokovic now faces deportation and has a court hearing on Monday. Now, Australia says he is free to leave if he wants to. In case you didn't know, Australia imposes some of the most draconian restrictions on the planet for the unvaccinated.